The private jet hummed softly as it cut through the early morning sky, sunlight spilling across the polished leather seats. Alexander Drake, billionaire businessman and single father, sat tensely in the cabin, cradling his infant daughter, Lila, whose cries pierced the quiet luxury. His normally impeccable suit was rumpled, and his perfectly styled hair threatened to rebel, though Alexander barely noticed. His attention was entirely consumed by the shrill, unrelenting wails of his tiny daughter. He had tried everything: rocking, feeding, even a lullaby he could barely remember from a parenting book. But nothing worked. Lila's little fists pounded the air in frustration, and her bright eyes, wide with confusion and discomfort, seemed to mock his helplessness. The flight attendants offered sympathetic glances, but their polite suggestions, perhaps a walk up and down the aisle, or she might need a diaper change, felt futile. Alexander could feel his patience fraying with every passing second. "This is ridiculous," he muttered under his breath, his voice taut with stress. Lila's cries only seemed to grow louder, cutting through the cabin like a tiny siren. From across the plain, Amara Hayes, a warm-hearted single mother traveling with her 6-year-old son, Ethan, glanced toward the commotion. She sat in economy, far from the private section, but the sound of the crying baby was impossible to ignore. Amara had seen stressed parents before, but there was something in the young billionaire's eyes, a mix of exhaustion, worry, and desperation, that made her pause. Ethan, engrossed in his tablet, peeked up at his mother. "Mom, the baby's crying really loud," he said softly. "I see, honey," Amara replied, her voice calm and gentle. She observed Alexander from afar, noting the way he shifted uneasily, trying to soothe Lila, but failing. The baby's tiny face was scrunched in frustration, and yet there was a vulnerability in the man holding her that made Amara's heart ache. Alexander let out a frustrated sigh, setting Lila down on his lap once more. "Come on, Lila, please, just a few minutes of quiet," he whispered, stroking her soft hair. But Lila only responded with another high-pitched wail, her tiny fist batting at the air. His assistant hovered nearby, wringing her hands nervously. "She won't stop, sir. Maybe we should," she began, but Alexander cut her off. "No, I won't just let her scream. I need to figure this out myself," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. He felt a sting of embarrassment. Here he was, a man used commanding boardrooms and billions, utterly powerless over his own child. Amara watched him hesitate, then glanced toward the economy section, his eyes catching hers for a brief moment. He looked lost. A small, hesitant part of her mind whispered that perhaps she could help. Taking a deep breath, she rose from her seat and approached, Ethan following quietly at her side. She didn't want to startle the man or make him defensive. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I couldn't help noticing. Babies sometimes calm down with a gentle hand or a little distraction. Maybe I could try." Alexander blinked, surprised. "You want to hold her?" His voice was incredulous, tinged with desperation. Amara nodded. "I've been a mother for 6 years. I've learned a few tricks." He hesitated. This was absurd. How could a stranger calm his daughter when nothing else had worked? And yet, seeing no other option, Alexander carefully lifted Lila from his arms and handed her over. Almost immediately, the wailing softened. Lila's tiny body relaxed in Amara's gentle embrace, and her cries subsided into soft hiccups. Alexander watched wide-eyed as the baby settled into her arms, her big eyes gazing up at the woman with a sense of trust he had never seen in her before. She's quiet," he murmured, stunned. "How?" Amara smiled gently, rocking Lila with the ease of someone who had faced countless sleepless nights. "Sometimes they just need calm energy," she explained. "Not fancy toys, not gadgets, just patience and warmth." Alexander felt a strange mix of relief and admiration. For the first time in hours, he could breathe. He sank into a seat, watching the soft rise and fall of Lila's tiny chest, marveling at how a simple act of kindness could work what his wealth and influence could not. Ethan, curious, crept closer to observe Lila, reaching out a small hand. Lila gurgled, responding to his gentle touch. Alexander couldn't help but smile, feeling an unexpected warmth spread through his chest. Somehow, amidst the chaos, A moment of serenity had arrived. Amara looked up at him, her eyes meeting his. "She's safe now," she said softly. "Just give her time." Alexander nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you. I didn't know anyone could calm her like this." Amara's smile widened, but she remained humble. "It's nothing, just a mother's instinct." As the plane continued its journey through the clouds, Alexander Drake realized something profound. Despite his wealth, his influence, and his success, it was the simple, human touch that mattered most. And perhaps, just perhaps, help could come from the most unexpected places. The soft hum of the jet engines filled the cabin, a soothing constant after the earlier chaos. Lila's small hands rested gently on Amara's shoulder, her bright eyes blinking sleepily. Alexander Drake, still in disbelief, sat beside them, watching the tiny miracle unfold. He had handed his daughter to a complete stranger, someone who wasn't a nanny, assistant, or family member, and yet the effect was instantaneous. He tried to speak, but the words faltered. I don't know how to thank you," he admitted, his voice quieter than usual, stripped of its usual confident timbre. Amara smiled softly, rocking Lila in her arms. "You don't need to thank me. Sometimes babies just need calm and patience. And maybe a little distraction from the stress." Alexander exhaled, running a hand through his hair. He had never felt this helpless before. Boardrooms, contracts, investors, he could handle all of that without blinking. But a baby's cries? That had nearly undone him. And now, watching Lila's tiny chest rise and fall in Amara's steady rhythm, he felt both relieved and humbled. Ethan, Amara's 6-year-old, peeked over curiously. "She's so tiny," he whispered, reaching a small hand toward Lila. The baby gurgled in response, eyes lighting up. Amara chuckled softly. "Careful, Ethan. Gentle touches only. She's very little." Alexander found himself smiling, a genuine smile, rare for him outside the safety of his business empire. The tension that had been suffocating him all morning was beginning to melt. "I don't understand how you're doing this," he admitted. "I've tried everything. Nothing worked." And yet, his voice trailed off. Amara shrugged, rocking Lila slightly. "Babies can sense panic. Sometimes all they need is calm, steady energy." The flight attendants peeked discreetly from the aisle, surprised that the crying had ceased. One of them whispered, "She's been quiet for 10 minutes now." Alexander gave a small, almost embarrassed shrug. Then, almost instinctively, Amara did something even more unexpected. She began teaching Alexander how to soothe Lila himself. "Hold her closer to your chest," she instructed gently. "Make sure her head is supported and hum softly. Babies recognize rhythm and tone. You don't need to be perfect, just present." Alexander mimicked her actions, holding Lila closer, humming a soft, clumsy tune he barely remembered. To his amazement, Lila's eyes closed halfway, and she rested her tiny head against his chest, comforted by the sound of his voice combined with the steady guidance Amara offered. "See," she whispered, "you're doing fine. She just needed you to believe you could." For the first time, Alexander realized that his wealth, his power, his ability to command the world meant nothing in the face of parenting. All that mattered was connection, presence, patience. As the flight continued, Alexander and Amara began talking quietly, their conversation flowing naturally, bridging the distance between strangers. "I couldn't imagine handling a child alone," Alexander admitted, his voice soft. "I thought being rich meant I could solve anything. But this? I'm powerless." Amara's gaze softened. Being a parent isn't about power. It's about love and patience and learning from the little moments. "I lost my husband when Ethan was 2. Raising him alone has been hard, but every smile, every hug makes it worth it." Alexander felt a lump in his throat. His mind flashed to his own struggles, long hours at the office, missed first steps, and countless moments where he had been too busy to be the father Lila needed. Watching Amara with her son, and now his daughter, he realized how much he had been missing. Ethan, ever curious, tugged gently on Lila's blanket. The baby responded with a tiny coo, and Alexander watched the interaction with a mix of amusement and awe. "Looks like they're getting along," he murmured, a rare warmth spreading through his chest. Amara smiled. Children have a way of connecting that adults often forget. They don't see wealth or status or fear. They see kindness. The turbulence of life, both literal and metaphorical, seemed to fade as the three of them, Alexander, Amara, and Lila, found a rhythm together, each passing minute deep in Alexander's admiration for Amara's calm, her patience, her instinctive understanding of children. Then, a sudden jolt of turbulence rattled the plane. Lila's eyes flew open, a startled cry bubbling from her throat. Alexander froze, panic rising instantly. But before he could act, Amara's hand steadied his, her voice firm yet gentle. "Breathe," she instructed. "You've got this. I'm right here." Alexander inhaled, holding Lila close, humming as Amara had shown him. Slowly, the crying faded, replaced by a soft sigh as Lila nestled against him, comforted once again. In that moment he realized he could be both strong and gentle, powerful yet patient. Amara's presence had changed everything, not just for Lila, but for Alexander. She had shown him that even the most unthinkable help, offered freely by a stranger, could save a moment, a day, and maybe even a life. As the plane cruised steadily, Alexander glanced at her, a silent gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thank you," he said, more sincerely than he ever had. Amara smiled. "No need. Just keep being present. That's all she really wants." And for the first time on this chaotic journey, Alexander Drake felt hope that he could learn, grow, and maybe, just maybe, build a family not just with wealth, but with love. The plane hummed steadily as clouds drifted lazily past the windows. Lila, now comfortably nestled in Alexander's arms with Amara guiding him, slept peacefully, a stark contrast to the chaos of the earlier flight. Alexander couldn't help but steal glances at her tiny face, marveling at how something so small could hold so much power over him. He had been a man used to controlling boardrooms, negotiations, and empires, but here, in the quiet of the cabin, he was powerless, humbled, and strangely grateful. Amara leaned against a nearby seat, watching Alexander with a warm smile. "You're doing better than you think," she said softly. "She can feel your confidence growing." Alexander chuckled quietly, shaking his head. "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm learning from a stranger on a plane how to be a father." Amara laughed gently, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Sometimes strangers are exactly what we need. Ethan, curious and wide-eyed, had been observing the interaction with fascination. Finally, he spoke up. "Daddy, can Lila sit with me for a bit? I want to show her my toys." Alexander raised an eyebrow at Amara, unsure if this was wise. "She might be too small to handle toys safely," he said. Amara shrugged. "She's fine. She's been calm this whole time. Besides, kids learn from each other." Carefully, Alexander placed Lila on Ethan's lap, keeping a protective hand close. Ethan's small face lit up as he offered her a plush toy. Lila reached for it with tiny hands, cooing softly. Alexander watched, amazed at the natural connection forming between the two children. "She's happy," he murmured, a rare softness in his voice. "I've never seen her like this." Amara's gaze softened. Children are mirrors of love. They feel it when it's genuine. For the next hour, Alexander and Amara shared quiet conversation, their voices mingling with the gentle sounds of the cabin. They spoke of their lives, their struggles, and their hopes. "I always thought wealth would make parenting easier," Alexander admitted. "I could buy anything, but I couldn't buy her peace. I couldn't buy calm. And I thought I had to fix everything myself." Amara nodded. "Parenting isn't something you can buy or command. It's about showing up, being present, and learning along the way. I've raised Ethan alone for 6 years. Every day is a lesson, every hug a reward." Alexander felt a lump in his throat. The weight of his own missed moments, the lullabies he had skipped, the first steps he had missed while attending meetings, pressed heavily on him. Seeing Amara with her child and now with his daughter stirred something deep inside him. Admiration, longing, and a quiet hope. Just as he was beginning to relax, the plane jolted with turbulence. Lila stirred, startled by the sudden shake. Alexander's heart raced as her tiny cries began to resurface. Amara was instantly at his side, her hand on his arm. "You've got this," she said firmly. "Stay calm. She can feel your fear." Taking a deep breath, Alexander focused, holding Lila close and humming softly. Amara whispered guidance when he faltered, but the main work was his. Slowly, Lila's cries softened and then ceased, leaving only gentle hiccups. Alexander exhaled, a mix of relief and pride flooding him. "See," Amara said, her smile warm. "You're learning. You're a natural." Alexander glanced at her, gratitude and admiration shining in his eyes. "I don't know how I could have done this without you." Amara shook her head gently. "I didn't do it. You did. I just showed you how to listen." As the flight continued, the children played quietly together. Ethan showed Lila how to stack soft blocks, and she clapped in delight each time a tower wobbled but didn't fall. Alexander watched the scene unfold, a rare sense of peace settling over him. He realized that the bond forming between the children was more than play. It was a bridge between two lives that had so far existed in parallel. Amara and Alexander spoke more about their lives. She shared memories of raising Ethan after losing her husband, of the night spent soothing him alone, of the small victories that made her feel like a parent despite the loneliness. Alexander opened up about the challenges of being a single father with a demanding career, about the loneliness that came with wealth, and the fear that he wasn't enough for Lila. "You're enough," Amara said softly, as if reading his thoughts. "Love, attention, patience, those are what matter. Money can't replace any of it." Her words struck him deeply. He realized that he had been so focused on control and success that he had neglected the simple, powerful moments of connection. Watching Amara interact with both children, he saw not just her competence, but her courage, warmth, and selflessness. And he felt something stirring, a desire not only to protect his daughter, but to cherish her, to learn from Amara, and perhaps to welcome her and Ethan into a larger family he had never imagined. By the time the plane began its descent, the atmosphere had shifted completely. Lila slept soundly, nestled in Alexander's arms, while Ethan and Amara sat close, sharing quiet laughter over a storybook. Alexander felt a new sense of hope. Hope that he could be a better father, hope that connection could come in unexpected ways, and hope that maybe, just maybe, a family could be formed from this unlikely meeting at 30,000 feet. As the wheels touched down, Alexander caught Amara's eye and offered a small, sincere smile. "Thank you for everything. Truly." Amara returned the smile, her eyes warm and understanding. Sometimes it's the little things that change everything. And in that moment, Alexander Drake realized that the unthinkable act of trust and kindness, a stranger holding his crying child, had not only calmed Lila but had begun to heal his heart as well. The plane touched down smoothly, tires rolling against the runway with a satisfying thrum. The soft hum of the engines faded, replaced by the quiet murmurs of passengers gathering their belongings. Alexander Drake stood, holding Lila in his arms, her tiny face still peaceful from the calm presence Amara had instilled. Amara adjusted Ethan's backpack, smiling at the small boy who had grown fond of Lila in such a short time. Alexander glanced at them, a strange mixture of admiration and gratitude washing over him. He had expected a stressful flight, one filled with tears and frustration. Instead, he found something far more precious: connection, patience, and the beginnings of a family. "Would you allow me to give you and Ethan a ride to your destination?" Alexander asked quietly, his usual confidence softened by sincerity. "It's the least I can do to thank you." Amara hesitated, touched by the offer. "That's very kind, Mr. Drake." "Thank you." "No. Call me Alexander," he said with a small smile. "And truly, I owe you more than a ride." The drive was quiet but comfortable. Lila slept on Alexander's lap, while Ethan chattered softly about his favorite games and stories. Alexander listened, genuinely interested, realizing that these small, mundane moments were some of the most precious he had ever experienced. At a stoplight, Ethan reached out and touched Lila's hand. "She's my friend," he said proudly. Lila gurgled in response, and Alexander felt his chest swell with warmth. Once they reached Amara's temporary stop, Alexander hesitated, then spoke softly. I know this might sound forward, but would you and Ethan like to visit our home sometime? Lila, she's happier when you're around, and I'd like for us to spend more time together, as a family. Amara's eyes glistened with emotion. She had been cautious all her life, protecting herself and Ethan from disappointments. But looking at Alexander, seeing his genuine care and vulnerability, she felt a spark of trust. I think we'd like that, she said softly. Lila stirred in Alexander's arms, tiny fingers reaching for Amara. He gently passed her to Amara, letting the two bond naturally. Ethan laughed, and Lila cooed, their laughter filling the air with warmth. As Alexander watched, he realized something profound. Wealth could buy comfort, power could buy influence, but love, real, patient, nurturing love, was priceless. In a single flight, a single gesture, and a single act of trust, his life had changed forever. They walked together toward the exit, the crisp air of the city greeting them. Alexander, Amara, Ethan, and Lila, an unlikely quartet brought together by fate, moved forward, step by step, hearts open. And in that quiet, heartwarming moment, Alexander knew that his daughter, his heart, and perhaps even his future, had found the family it had been searching for all along.